Hello, I'm David Gibson, Managing Editor of Third Wednesday Magazine, quarterly journal of literary and visual arts, available in print and online. Today I'm with you in another contributor reading from the magazine, this time from Terry Allen. Terry is an emeritus professor of theater arts at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, where he taught acting, directing, and playwriting. He's the author of the chapbook Monsters in the Rain and has two full-length poetry collections, Artwork, and his latest, Reading on the Last Train. His poems have appeared in many journals, including the I-70 Review, Third Wednesday, Popshot Quarterly, Cloudbank, and Into the Void in the Main Street Rag. He lives in Columbia, Missouri currently with his wife Nancy and their dog Jayden. His latest book, Reading on the Last Train, is published by Kelsey Books in May of 22 and is now available for purchase at Amazon.com and at the Kelsey Books website. Terry, the internet is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to read a poem here from Waiting on the Last Train. This poem was originally published in Third Wednesday last fall. It's called The Things They Left Behind. Have you heard anything about Lon Chaney? My wife asks. And in the split second before I answer, pictures of Lon Chaney come to my mind, and I realize I'm thinking immediately of Lon Chaney Jr., and not his father, who famously starred in the silent film version of The Phantom of the Opera in the 1920s. And I'm not sure which one she is asking me about, but really it's Junior who has made the biggest impression on me. And I can clearly see him as if he's still with us, as Lenny talking to George about the rabbits in Of Mice and Men, and the retired sheriff with the crippled arthritic hands in High Noon, who tells Will Kane that he can't help him because he can't even hold a gun anymore, and Will would only be worried about him if there is any trouble. And then, of course, I see Lon Chaney as the Wolfman, a role that changed his acting career forever. And I also think of Tim O'Brien, who wrote the collection of Vietnam War stories, The Things They Carried. And I say to myself, yes, that's right, that's true. But it's also the things they left behind, like these wonderful characters. And being a little confused at this point, I ask my wife to repeat what she asked me. What? I say. Have you heard anything about Liz Cheney? She asks. No, I reply. The next poem is also a husband and wife poem from the same book. My wife is a list maker and I'm not. It's a perfect relationship since she plans for a trip to the grocery store days in advance, and I treat the whole experience as improvisational theater. But then sometimes I find her list on the kitchen counter growing as we get closer to the big day, and I can't help but add to it every once in a while just for our amusement by writing woodpecker on the list between fruit and milk. And later, when we're at the store and she's systematically filling the cart and I'm wandering aimlessly about looking for inspiration, I'm really waiting for her to discover my amazing creativity. And when we're finally heading for the checkout line and she hasn't said anything, I ask if she everything on. That's when she says that she did. And I act surprised and I pick through the items in the cart. Are you sure? I ask. And that's when she says, well, almost everything. The woodpeckers were picked over, a little too squishy and gray and really past their sell-by date. She says this, of course, over her shoulder as she turns the cart into the nearest checkout line and makes a large check mark in the air. I'm going to read two other poems that were going to be a part of this book, but the timing was off, and they're coming out this fall in I-70 Review. This next poem has a persona in it who I imagine is a 14-year-old boy going on 15, talking to a best friend, and they're sharing stories about their younger brothers. The poem is called Nutso. Yeah, well, my little brother is Nutso too. It started when he got a 162-piece painting and drawing set for his birthday, which led him to dress in a black and white striped shirt, dark checkered pants, and a black beret, pretending he was Pablo Picasso, speaking in a terrible Spanish accent, sounding more like Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride. That was the first 3 weeks. Then for the next month, he carried a walking stick, wore a fake mustache and a cape, pretending to be Salvador Dali. And if anyone tried to talk to him, he would say, "Surrealism? I am surrealism." And that's not the worst of it. It was 2 weeks ago when he decided he was Jackson Pollock, and our parents found him in the kitchen with a canvas on the floor, splattering it with old house paints by using a turkey baster, a spatula, and dried out brushes from the garage. Of course, you can imagine how much of the paint was everywhere else in the kitchen. Since then, he's been confined to his room, but that hasn't improved things much. Now he wears a bandage over his left ear, stares out the window, and pretends he's in a mental asylum. Yesterday, he told me, "I'm into swirls," whatever that means. The next poem is called Aunt Gracie. The writer's name came up and someone said, "I've never liked him since the time I saw him at Once Upon a Crime, that mystery bookstore in Minneapolis. He was there promoting his new novel, and you could tell immediately just looking at him that he was a misogynist. He didn't even need to open his mouth." And that's when my thoughts turned to memories of Grace Shields, our senior high school college prep English teacher. She had us writing paper after paper with the understanding that any 3 errors in spelling, punctuation, or grammar resulted in an automatic F. And back then, she considered grammar and punctuation a science and content an art. She was tough. And she expected a lot, but God bless her, she gave us plenty of opportunity to fail, then learn from our failures. I remember that she would never tolerate the mixing up of second person with first person, and would certainly expect that if we used a word like misogynist, that we would know what it meant. And I could hear Mrs. Shields saying, misogyny comes from the Greek word roots, mesane and gene, woman. Therefore, misogynist means someone who hates women, just as misandrist means someone who hates men. We called her Aunt Gracie, but never to her face, even though we considered it a form of endearment. And even today, if I drive outside the white lines of grammar and begin a sentence with a conjunction, or have fun with long run-on sentences spinning out like improvised jazz, or play fast and loose with the Oxford comma, I can still look outside the window going 70 miles per hour and see the lines that Aunt Gracie laid down. The last 2 poems come from my book, Artwork. The first of these is a poem called Name That Dog. It was a time when I would drive my son to elementary school, and we would tune into the jazz station out of Minneapolis and hear Anita O'Day singing, "Pick yourself up, dust yourself off." And he would say, "That's from Swing Time." And I would feel the same sort of pride other parents must have felt when they told their neighbors and anyone else who would listen that their second grader was a straight A student. "That's right," I would say, "it's from Swing Time." And we would talk about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers until we finally slipped into one of our favorite games, Name That Dog. "What's the name of Nick and Nora's pet wire fox terrier and the Thin Man?" I'd say. "Asta." "What's the name of the dog in The Uninvited?" he'd ask. "Ralph," I'd say with a straight face. "No, it's Bobby. Don't you remember him chasing a squirrel inside that empty house and then being afraid to go up the stairs because of the ghosts?" "That's right," I say. "What about the dog in The Wizard of Oz?" "Toto, of course, everyone knows that." "Well, what about the name of the dog that played Toto?" "Terry the Terrier." By that time, we would have arrived at his school, and I'd drop him off, and I'd recall on the way to work a time when we were at the public library in the media section looking at films to borrow. when a lady close by yanked a boy about my son's age by the arm and pulled him away, saying, "No, that's not for you. Over here, these are the children's movies." And we looked to see what the boy had picked up, and it was Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times. "I think he would have liked that one," my son said. And the last poem is, here we go. Still in his cups, Bacchus looked down from Mount Olympus and laughed. Gazing across the Rubicon, Julius Caesar spoke in Greek, not Latin, when he said, "Let the die be cast." And even then it was mistranslated, but no matter. It was something he liked to say, and he would repeat himself often, much to the annoyance of those around him. It was a sentiment he'd borrowed from the Greek playwright Menander, who wrote domestic comedies about boy meets girl, boy likes girl, girl likes boy, parents don't like boy and girl together. And from that point on, you guessed it, obstacles are placed in their path until finally all the obstacles are removed, and so forth and so forth and so forth, until they finally are allowed to wed. Pretty funny stuff. And from those comedies, Julius Caesar would come away laughing and repeating Menander's lines often enough that friends would wager when they got together at a party how long it would take him to drop the one about games beginning and dies being cast just as the wine was served. And when he did, everyone would laugh, me included. And that's when my friend Aurelia, who didn't see what was so funny, would poke me in the ribs and say, "Whom the gods love dies young," quoting Menander. This final poem was also published in Third Wednesday in 2018. Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to thank Terry Allen for an enjoyable reading. This is David Simpson signing off from Third Wednesday Magazine. Join us at thirdwednesday.org. Thank you.